We went to a private collector's out in the West End and saw her home, which was quite an experience. It was very special to go and meet this lady. And I found it very similar to like my grandmother's house and stuff, so I've been working with kind of looking at the way that the furniture's becoming outdated and things are changing, like the light bulbs in these really old original lights are these new horrible LED lights, and that's just exactly the same as like my grandmother's house. It reminds me of the way that she decayed with her house and now the house has been left without her. So I'm working with that kind of my emotional connection to my grandmother's home. Because I'm looking at this decay, I think at the minute the mortality thing's quite big, and even though we are living much longer, are we actually just prolonging this kind of pain and decay even further? So mortality and decay is what being human means to me at the minute, which is a bit morbid.
I was focusing on an Indian festival for my final piece, which talks about different forms of humanity, different aspects of it, different emotions and so on. That span. It's a festival that spans over 9 days, and each day has a different thing they celebrate on, and each day has its own color, and then it's just a different emotion. So I thought my final piece would actually have something with that, colors, and just it's going to be very interactive. That's the place I am at right now. Well, being human for me means expressing yourself, I think, to an extent, because everybody is so different.
It's a cut tetrahedron. I'm working on sort of like sculptures or totems that emulate the symbiosis between the masculine and feminine energies that in conjunction create human life. And I want to create that sort of totem of representation for these two energies. That's what being human to me is, just those two energies combining at the perfect time and creating you.
So I'm going to make a series of postcards and photographs and focus on the history of my grandpa in particular. So my grandpa was a crazy character who was like caught in an avalanche and survived it, and we have a spoon that he said he killed a Nazi with, and how he was interested in the hills and doing these walking and almost like this James Bond character. So it was great talking to my gran, and I think just having that archive that's personal with videotapes and diaries and everything really helped get an inside perspective. I think being human is looking at personalities and how you approach the world. So I wanted to look at it from my family's perspective, because everyone in my family is very different personality-wise, and how that adds up. And especially looking at my papa in particular, as a human being, he was almost like indestructible, because he could learn so much and walked every single Monroe in Scotland and just had such a passion for life and everything that he did. So I wanted to look at why people have these passions and how that transcends into family and where you get your passions in from.
I think being human is different meanings for me, but I think being human, I think the important point is human rather than being. So, because fashion is service for humans, so you live in this world. So, human is the important thing, I think.
Just kind of experimenting, just kind of building up shoulders with fabrics and working on mannequins and stuff like that. just using different techniques, using like metal poles and stuff to make arms bigger, and stuff with shoulders, like getting poles out the way so it builds up so we can get as far away from the human shape as possible and kind of make something kind of almost monster-like and kind of alienish.
When I heard this topic, I was thinking like how being human, the most important point is human thoughts, and like were we really different than animals in our body? I think it's our thoughts. So I think being human is more like how we think things, how we thought of them. Yeah.
Yeah, not as much as that. Yeah, exactly. Like sort of the help or whatever.
That contrast material as well.
Chose did have
Like
to
why
do
it's
yeah. This one was a bit of
Secret shapes and that stuff right there.
So we went to the Hunterian Gallery to see a thing about Gallic heritage and Gallic identity. You're actually now covering one, a bit on each. The structure of the exhibition itself, what it was communicating, was what I was interested in. So it was in this really long, narrow corridor and really high ceilings. So it was almost church-like. There was something really religious about how everything was being shown. So I've looked at it and I've kind of thought, well, it's sort of a bit of an afterlife for this culture that's starting to die. I've been reading about afterlives, ideas of afterlife, some religious, some science fiction, some scientific, some people looking at things like computers and devices that still communicate with each other, like Facebook accounts that exist of dead people, and people who might have an out-of-office set up, so you can send them an email and you'll get an email back, but they're not here anymore. So there's these traces, it's like traces that are left by people. So afterlife in lots of different senses, not necessarily religious ones, but that's what I'm kind of trying to explore with this.
There we go. There you go.
Being human is like having sets of beliefs, having sets of truths, and sets of identities, basically, that we attribute to ourselves. And that's why I chose the spinning wheel, because it's sort of like mechanical reiteration of identities every day. So we have these wheels that we show to other people socially, and that are working almost mechanically. We do these actions to replicate identities without thinking too much about it. Yep.
You're kind of on a wall and you're not on a cliff.
We visit the Glasgow archive, the resource centre down in the south side. So that has all the collections from the People Palace. There was a lot of objects that told stories there, so obviously a lot of our studies involve like narrative for games and stuff. So through interacting and reading about, like, we started to learn more about the people who owned them. We got to look in like this suitcase, and we knew nothing about the guy who owned it, but through all of his objects and stuff, all the contents, we could learn like his background and like what he'd done in life and kind of thing. So it was really interesting, kind of that non-verbal narrative that we got from it.
How we process history and everything of that kind of sort. So mainly like how we look at, past things that have happened, things that people have done, and how we actually remember it. That's what kind of influenced me on my project. It's the idea of our morality and our avoidance of death, and how we can like accept it, because it's one of those aspects that we don't like to talk about, but it's kind of like this inevitable thing that ends up happening that we don't like thinking about. And that's my kind of game basis, is questioning why do we not talk about it and what we could do about it. Being human, to me, it means so many different things. It's, how we process information, morality, what makes different choices better than others, are instances of why things are right, why things are wrong, so many different things. Pinpointing it just to one separate thing is just absurd to me.
In relation to this project, I wanted to start by looking into things that were uniquely human traits. So I wanted to find something that was just a human thing. So I started doing some research, and some of the ideas that I started looking into was different elements of the human body which are unique, such as our shoulders. The way that our shoulders work are unique. The act of sharing a bed with another human. So that's like just two human bodies sharing a bed. So I started documenting the bed after me and my partner had had sex. The way that the body interacted with the bed would leave a different mark every single time. So each bed was left in a different state. It wasn't really repeatable despite doing very similar activities. And then I started taking like photos of my own bed and the other partners' beds, just because the impact and the mark that the bodies left were as unique as the interaction that was shared in that bed. And then after you make the bed, it's a clean slate. You can start all over again.
There we have the Ethiopian famine. Further on there's the bricks, that's at Canal Works actually in Rajasthan, and at the end is a bar in Shanghai.
Started to research kind of the decomposition of the human form, and then that got me looking at plastination, and I found it with these things called body farms, where they're about, you donate your body but they let it decompose naturally. And you can actually go and see these things and see kind of the human form, and it's all used for medical research. And I just love the contrast between the two, and just looking at it purely as a form, all these colours that appear just kind of and then through the natural process and the tension across the skin. So I started to just play with latex, and it's kind of taken off from there. People tend to feel a bit kind of sheltered about death, and when someone's buried, that's it. So with this project, it was interesting just to actually see what goes on past that and see how it kind of develops and kind of what becomes of your body once you move on, I suppose.
I found this stone arrowhead from the Neolithic kind of period, and that kind of sparked my investigation towards our project. It's all about thinking back to why our first ancestors started documenting their own lives, and kind of relating back to today, documenting my own life in 2019, relating to posthumanism and digital culture. I think it's going to be, I was kind of taking this form of a vase and trying to see how abstracted by technology I could make it before it became unrecognisable and like undeemed fit for purpose. So kind of something between technology and clay.
Did you get a place?
Expression, identity, how we show ourselves to the people around us, and basically just how we are as people, as being human, you know, like our characteristics, our personality, everything. Yeah.
What do you decipher from the title?
A pot mender.
Okay, good.
So men's pots. So we visited a tenement house. We came across a 19th century toothbrush. So we explored all of the concepts around toothbrushing and how it has kind of remained the same throughout the different years, and we're trying to minimize water consumption in toothbrushing routine.
We worked a lot around hygiene, how that's changed through the ages, and how sort of the whole social context around hygiene is changing. And we sort of tried to work around who does the cleaning in the house, how the gender role is sort of changing through the time. How can we see that evolving into the future as well? All kinds of animals have social interaction, but I think it's the language that we communicate in and the way that we communicate. And our aspiration to be more than we are. I think that makes us pretty human. We always want to be bigger and greater and everything, we want to learn. Yeah.
The project made me lose myself more in
the thinking of human being, because it's a really complex researching point and it has a lot of roots. I'm trying to make a fetal doll that is more accurate than the doll that we've seen on the Hunterian gallery, more realistic one.
Being human means to me is to be free. Yes, to be free.
I've chosen the surgical saws, which were used for brain surgery and removing bones in the 18th century. And I was thinking about the experience of what it would have been like to actually have surgery then. You wouldn't have any anaesthetic or anything like that, so you'd be conscious for the whole thing. So I was interested in the sounds you would experience.
So some religions don't believe in surgery and stuff like that. My religion feels like the body's like a gift, so we shouldn't abuse it in that kind of way, so we should like keep the way it is. So I'm trying to explore that more and how decision making for the patient, if they're a religious person, if they're a non-religious person, and why they would do it or why they wouldn't do it. I would say being human is just take it how you want it. I think we should have more of free will in how we live our lives, and that's how being human is. And like we're always learning, we're always asking questions. So,
We went to the Glasgow Film Archive. I was inspired by the domestic spaces in the videos. So we all made short films, 1-minute films, about the theme being human. Well, for me, it's about the question, like, what is life about? And for me, it's actually joy. I think that since we are here for a short time, why not to enjoy ourselves? And that's being human for me.
I declare your visitors in that reception. Thank you very much. Shall we look at the Institute? All right, thank you.
For the archive visits, we went to the Royal College of Surgeons nearby, and so we just looked at like medical documents for that and like drawings and stuff that they had for people with disabilities. We've been put in groups, and in my group we've designed a playroom for blind children or children with some visual impairment. So we've designed that for them.
We've got things like ones for faces as well, which seems quite unusual. Missing fingers, all kinds of things. So it's all in here, all the different things you would need to do that. Let's see what else we've got. So more sort of shoes, knees. That's actually an artificial limb with a built-up shoe as well.
Our project specifically was to design a building that we're using for musical practice and performance. It's designed for people's specific needs such as mobility, disadvantages and visually impaired people. Being human to me means being different. None of us are the same, and throughout this project we got to explore that you don't design for the average man anymore. We have to learn to design for every single human that we can.
For our project, we're designing a space for 3 different individuals who have all got a difference or a disability. We've decided to design it for 3 different blind people, all with different cases. So like one's fully blind with a guide dog, one's partially blind with full loss of hearing, and then we've got a partially blind person who must have a cane. So by visiting the prosthetics in the Royal College, what I took away from that was we have to cater for people with like canes and guide dogs in order to help them navigate around the building. Everyone's equal, no matter if you've got a disability, if you don't, what gender, what race, whatever. We're all human. I think that's good enough.